Hi guys, welcome to the channel. This is What If Goku Was in Fairy Tail. Before we start, remember to like and subscribe to help the channel. Also check the description for the creator of the fanfic. Chapter 18. Declaration of War. Magnolia was all but shut down. Shops had closed, windows were being boarded up, families locked up their homes, and in the entire city not a single child was playing in the street. For near the center of the town, blood dripped down an old weathered tree. The mages of Fairy Tail surrounded it, shock, horror, and rage covering each and every one of their faces. For hanging from the tree was Team Shadowgear. Large, metal clamps were crushing their wrists against the harsh bark, the darkening bruises covered up by the drying streaks of red that coated most of their arms. Their clothes were torn up and their bodies were covered in grime, mixing with cuts and scrapes that littered their skin. And most prominently, a large, dripping mark had been painted onto Levy's bare stomach. The mark of Phantom Lord. The mages looked over the scene, every last one of them wanting to help their injured companions out but too shocked to even move. Powers were flaring up with emotion around the courtyard. Fires started up only to be turned to ice. Sparks of energy danced across the ground, liquefying the stone. But the greatest concentration of power came from Makarov. A yellow aura filled the air and his muscles flared, veins bulging across his forehead. Suppressing his rage for a few moments, the old man reached up and gently removed the three battered teens from their suspended position and lowered them down. Several mages darted forwards, taking Shadowgear from their raging guardian and rushing them to waiting doctors as fast as they safely could. Makarov watched them go, bloodshot eyes tracking the retreating forms until they disappeared out of sight. The second they were gone, he spun on his heels, marching straight back for the guild. After a few moments his charges followed him, like little ducklings after their mother. The old weathered doors slammed open with enough force to shake the hinges as Makarov stormed in and walked straight over towards the bar. He opened up a secret compartment underneath the counter and pulled out a single dark bottle. His personal whiskey, imported from the other side of the globe, crafted by a powerful mage who was able to magically enhance his brew to surpass any other in both taste and potency. A single bottle was worth more than a month's pay, and the old man saved it for only the most special occasions. Or the most dire. As those he considered his children quietly filed into the room and took up positions around the bar, Makarov popped off the cork and began to take long, slow pulls from the bottle. The guild was silent except for quiet footfall and the consistent glugs of a vanishing liquor supply. When the entire bottle was drained, the old man stopped and looked at it in mild surprise. Weary eyes looked over the old guild hall, meeting the eye of each and every mage for just a moment, just long enough to share their pain. No one looked away though, each one of his brats shared the same anger and they would not turn away from it. My children, today we've been struck a grievous blow. You all saw what happened to Shadowgear. Even now we don't know what kind of condition they are in or how long it might take them to recover. If they will even fully recover at all. For a moment the words were choked up in Makarov's throat, and with glistening eyes he continued. Phantom Lord. They've never liked us, always whining about how they should be the sole strongest guild of fury. You all know I couldn't care less. Let them bluster all they want, it doesn't matter. They are only words. It never mattered, it was just like the jealous whining of an annoying sibling. But now they have attacked us in a way that truly matters. Our family has been hurt. So now we have a choice. The council rightly forbids any sort of inter-guild combat for the safety of the general population. In these kinds of situations we are supposed to report the incident and let them handle matters. But we all know my opinion of the Magic Council. A big enough bribe and the matter will be buried so deep that I'll be dead and buried before it ever sees the light of day. Instead, I want to pay Phantom Lord back in kind. We shall not let them get away with this unpunished. Fairy Tail, are you with me? A deafening roar filled the air, shaking the foundations of the entire city. Heart swelling with pride at their loyalty, Makarov thrust his staff up into the air and he matched their cries with a bellow of his own. Very well. Then Fairy Tail is at war. While the mages of Fairy Tail were gathering their forces for their trek across the country, Kagura was draining every bit of magic she had into the shaping of her sword. For half an hour she had suspended the white-hot blade in midair, hovering within the massive campfire. Even with all the heat applied to it, shaping the metal was an uphill struggle. She could feel herself trembling and her body screaming at her to stop, her magical core tapping into her very life energy just to sustain the force for a few minutes longer. To make it even harder, she could feel the blade sucking in her magic. The metal of the blade felt alive somehow, like it was somehow merging with her magic even as it took shape. It seemed to be altering the very nature of the blade, making it hers in more than just possession. Never in her life had she felt anything like it. The ancient magic was so foreign, so different, that she could barely even comprehend it. She could feel archenemy like it was an extension of her body. She had heard that expression linked to swords before, but never had she thought it could feel so literal. She could feel the energy she had put into the sword, as well as exactly how much more would be needed. As though the sword was challenging her to finish the job. Energy, she slowly realized, that she didn't quite possess. She was so close, but it would take a huge surge of energy to ignite the final bonding and make archenemy whole once again. The stress of unleashing her gravity magic for so long had pushed Kagura further than she had ever gone before. It had shown her a whole other level to her power that she hadn't even known she possessed. Had she waited even just a few more months, she would have been able to tap into it on her own, and she'd likely have no trouble in restoring the sword to its former glory. But somehow, she could already feel the sword beginning to slip away from her. Her magical connection with the blade had begun to slow and waver. It was as though the sword was telling her if she failed to finish it now, she'd never have another chance to have such a connection with it again. She needed help. For the first time since she had begun, Kagura cast her eyes around, groaning a bit as her eyes tried to adjust to the sudden change in lighting. Blinking rapidly, she spotted her temporary companion completing a set of one-finger push-ups. A large pile of logs was stacked beside him. He must have been using those to keep the fire going, she hadn't even noticed. Goku, she croaked out. He glanced up at her and hopped back up to his feet. As he made his way over, she took a big gulp of air and gasped out at him. I'm almost out of power. I can't finish the sword. So close, just need a bit more. Do you need me to try to channel some energy into you? No, don't know if my body could handle that now. The sword. I'm channeling the energy into the sword. I just need to trigger the final bonding. Alright, what do you need me to do? The ore absorbed your power before, that can be the catalyst. Hit it with everything you got, that should be enough. Alright, I can do that. Let's give it a shot. Goku cupped his hands by his waist and sank down into a crouch. Ka, me, ha. The blue beam shot forwards the blade and split apart the moment it made impact. Strands of energy wrapped themselves around the glowing metal like a cocoon. Goku's brow furrowed, and he pumped even more energy into the attack. More strands burst forth and wrapped around the blade, hiding it from view. The fire blew out, leaving the clearing glowing in the blue light of Goku's power. Kagura felt more than saw Goku's ki embracing the blade. Her eyes were closed in concentration, reaching out to the sword as it swallowed the energy with an almost hungry greed. When Goku boosted his attack, her eyes snapped open and she gathered up the very last drops of power she had left. Hyaahhhhhh. The entire mountainside was bathed in a pale blue light as she cried out, the sword in the center like a blazing sun. Then abruptly it ended and the unnatural light vanished like lightning. In its place lay a perfect, gleaming sword. Kagura stared at the completed weapon for what felt like hours, reveling in the strange new connection she felt forged within herself. It felt like the blade was staring back. She felt like it was giving her an approving nod, as though it was saying, "You'll do." A small, bubbly giggle escaped her lips before she passed out from sheer exhaustion. Mirajane's face was blank as she watched Urza lead the assembled mages from the guildhall down towards the train station. A few years ago she would have been right up at the front, side by side with her one-time rival, ready to deal justice to anyone who had dared to hurt her comrades. Heck, she would have been far ahead of them, beating the crap out of phantoms long before her friends got there. Now she was left behind to care for the wounded, an S-class mage left to clean bandages and wash sheets. An S-class mage forced to wait behind while her baby brother went to war. Elfman was near the front of the pack as they marched out, yelling out votes of confidence to each and every member of Fairy Tail, trying to inspire them to be the man he drove so hard to become. The man that he wished he was when Lysina died. Lysina. It always came back to Lysina. Her single greatest failure has always been that moment. Elfman may blame himself for not being strong enough to control the beast, but her failures were the one that put her in that situation to begin with. She knew the beast was dangerous. The thing had single-handedly wiped out an entire platoon of magical knights. She should have gone in full power right off the bat. The creature likely would have been flattened in an instant. But it was the first time she had been allowed to bring her siblings on an S-class mission since she had gotten the rank. Her powers had grown greatly since she had last had a chance to travel with them, and she had wanted to show off. She had toyed with the beast, dancing around it and poking at it, treating the whole fight like a game. Elfman of course spent the whole time worrying, but Lysina had laughed and like a fool Mirajane had turned to smile at her younger sister. That single moment of distraction was all the beast needed to utterly crush her. Elfman had been forced in to save her life, and then Lysina had died because of it. In her heart, Mirajane knew that the wrong Strauss had died that day. Hey, Mira. Mirajane blinked and looked around. The sunlight coming was almost non-existent now. Who knew how long she had sat around staring into space? The former takeover mage's eyes found the concerned gaze of Lucy and small, apologetic smile formed on her lips. In an instant her self-loathing was gone once more, and the cheery barmaid personality took hold. Oh Lucy, I didn't see you there. How are you? I'm fine I guess, I'm just worried. All of our friends are out there and we can't do anything to help them out. Yeah, I know it's tough, waiting like this. But Kana and Natsu were right to ask you to stay behind. You don't have enough experience to go into a full-scale battle against another guild. They don't want to see you get hurt. Well, what about them? I don't want to see them get hurt either. How can they tell me to do something that they wouldn't do themselves? Why is it okay for them to risk their lives but they won't let me do the same thing for them? Since you joined, those two have been your best friends, right? Yeah. Both of them joined Fairy Tail when they were small children, with no possessions and no family to speak of. In fact, that's true for almost every single member of this guild. Those two have been traveling around the country, fighting and growing stronger for a long time. On top of that though, they've found family here. A family that they consider you a part of. To them and just about everyone else here, family is the most important thing. That's why everyone was willing to go to war for what they did to Shadowdeer. You've only been an official mage for a few months and you've barely had any real combat experience. Hey, I've completed plenty of missions. I can handle myself. Lucy protested. You've fought bandits and monsters. Mira smiled. This isn't going to be simple fight. It's going to be a full-blown crapshoot between our guild and theirs. Phantom Lord does in fact rival Fairy Tail in power. So there are going to be more than a few S-class mages throwing their power around. Kana and Natsu don't want to worry about having to protect you. Damn it. I'm still holding them back, aren't I? Lucy. No, you're right. I'm still way behind everyone else. I'd just get in the way. I get it. Thanks for the talk, Mirajane. I think I'm going to go out for a bit of a walk. I'll talk to you later, alright. Not waiting for a response, the blonde bolted out the door. Mira raised her hand as if to stop her, only to allow it to fall limp as the door slammed closed. It's something you and I have in common. She finished to the empty hall. Mirajane gazed at the door, contemplating going after Lucy but ultimately decided against it. She had nothing that she could say that might fix things. In all likelihood she would just make it worse. The former takeover mage got up with a sigh as she made her way over towards the medical wing. She had sat around for long enough. It was time to do something productive with all of her nervous energy. She idly gave thought to calling in all of the members of the guild that weren't present in the invasion party, but ultimately decided against it. There was no telling where any of them were or how quickly they could get back. Besides, almost every active member of the guild was present for the attack. With the element of surprise, they should have no trouble. Now if only this rainstorm would let up. Goku sat quietly tending to the campfire as he waited for Kagura to wake up. He had laid her down a bit further back from the remains of the fire and had gingerly placed the newly reformed archenemy beside her. The energy he felt coming off the blade was bizarre, a strange, violent mixture of powers that fluctuated so much he couldn't even properly measure it. He could sense Kagura's connection to it, unfamiliar energies he assumed were from the blade's previous masters, and even a bit of his own power. The thing felt like a living bomb. Hey, I can't wait to see just how strong you're gonna be. Goku grinned at the sleeping swordswoman. Kagura merely snorted in her sleep, reaching out to grab archenemy and pulling it to her. Then he frowned, glancing up at the sky. Something was coming, and coming fast. Searching the sky he spotted a dark blot growing steadily bigger. As it drew nearer, the breeze that was gently rustling the trees began to whip itself into a gale. Goku coughed as some of the campfire's ash blew into his face. He got himself ready, as the blot grew bigger, taking the shape of a man in a big black cloak. That just screamed trouble. The man stopped in midair, the wind coming to a sudden unnatural stillness as he hovered above the clearing and looking down at Goku and Kagura. Goku tensed, ready to spring into combat at a moment's notice. The man raised his hand. Hello there. He waved. Goku blinked. The man lowered himself to the ground. So, he began. He spoke with the voice of someone who had absolutely all the time in the word. What's going on here? Goku blinked again. He felt like he may have misjudged the situation somehow. He shook his head. Who are you? Asked. Oh, right. I should introduce myself, shouldn't I? The name's Bellis. Yours? Goku. And what about Sleeping Beauty over there? He nodded at Kagura. Why are you asking? Well, I have this group of friends you see. I'd been away from them for a while, doing work and such. But when I got back, I found out that they had all been arrested. He finished, spreading his hands outward with a sigh and shaking his head. You're a member of that dark guild, Harpy Feather, aren't you? I recognize the cloak. Got it in one, buddy. Bellis smiled. Which brings me to what I'm doing here. See, I went to the local division of Rune Knights, just to see what's going on, and they tell me that my boys were actually taken out by a single girl. Dark hair, young, carries around a fancy sword sheath, and I can't help noticing that the girl over there happens to match that very description. So you want revenge then? Goku grinned, grateful that they were getting back to familiar territory. I guess. Bellis shrugged. I mean, I don't care about my former guild mates that much. They were all kind of massive tools. But it's a matter of principle. If it gets out that a single girl beat up my guild and I didn't do anything about it, I'll be a laughingstock. So yeah, I guess I'll have to thrash her. Maybe take that fancy sword of hers or something. Can you wake her up for me? Revenge feels kinda pointless if she sleeps through it. Not a chance. Goku said, stepping in between Bellis and Kagura. She's in no condition to fight right now. That wouldn't have to do with that giant explosion of light earlier, would it? That's how I found you, for the record. It might, but I'll tell you what. Why don't you fight me instead? Bellis shrugged off his cloak. Whatever works for you, buddy. Goku sunk into a combat stance, analyzing his foe. Without the cloak, Bellis actually looked a lot smaller. In fact, he was almost unhealthily skinny. He looked like a breeze might blow him over at any moment. Let me guess. Goku smirked. You're a wind mage. Close enough. Bellis smiled. What gave it away? Was it the flying? I bet it was the flying. Goku had fought wind mages before. They were easy to deal with. You just had to hit them really hard before they could start throwing their wind around. His specialty. He snapped into motion, throwing himself through the air and sending a snap kick right at the wind mage's face. Bellis only had time to widen his eyes before Goku's boot slammed into his face and burst right through. Goku went flying onward, slamming into a rock wall and jumping off it. He looked back at Bello's headless body, which turned to face him. The wind began to swirl around him and reformed its head. That was pretty scary, Bellis said, staring at Goku in surprise. You're more aggressive than you look. Why'd you pop like that? Why should I explain my powers? Seems kinda stupid, doesn't it? Bellis made a gesture and Goku felt himself lifted into the air and slammed back against the tree. Then lifted back and suspended in midair. He struggled but could get no traction. There was nothing for him to grab. So are you just a brawler or something? 'Cause if so, you might be a bit out of your league. Bellis said conversationally. Oh, I'm just getting started. Goku pointed his hands away from the dark mage and shot a blast of ki. The force sending him rocketing through the air, slamming his feet into Bello's stomach. This time Bellis burst apart completely. Goku felt the power holding him suspended dissipate and he dropped to the ground, landing in a crouchy frown as the air rippled and Bellis reformed. Neat, Bellis said, before pointing at Goku and sending a blast of air screaming towards him. Goku's hands snapped up to cover his face as he planted himself. The blast hit him like sandstorm compressed into the size of a water balloon, ripping his clothes to shreds and forcing him to focus his ki into his body to prevent any serious damage. Bellis stopped blasting and raised an eyebrow as Goku straightened himself. You're sturdy, he conceded with a nod. Goku's reply was two golden blasts of ki that hit Bellis head on. Instead of exploding, the blast shot through him and carried him along with them, shooting the dark mage into the sky. Goku grinned, happy to making some progress, only for it to slide off his face as Bellis floated back downwards, looking disheveled from his sudden flight, but not actually hurt. Okay, that was a bit embarrassing. A for effort, kiddo. Goku narrowed his eyes. You're not a wind mage. He muttered. Well, I'm more of an air mage. It's like a wind mage's badass older brother. It was a pretty good guess though. Bellis admitted. So you're just a bunch of hot air then? Goku quipped, stalling for time as his mind went into overtime. This was pretty bad actually. Trying to punch this guy would get him nowhere. Ooh, scathing. Like I haven't heard that one before. The ki blast had blown him backwards. The heat probably sucked the air along with it or something, but it didn't actually hurt the guy. That didn't leave him a lot of options. At this point he would just have to try and outlast the dark mage. I think I've played around enough, so I'm just gonna wrap this up right now, okay? Bellis jerked his hand away from Tensed, ready to dodge the attack this time, only for his body to jerk painfully. He gasped, or tried to. He couldn't breathe. It's a funny thing, air. Bellis commented, his voice sounding a long way away as he watched Goku choke on nothing. People really take it for granted, it's always there. But they never realize how terrifying it is to lose it. I did, a long time ago, but that's another story. Goku's body went into overload as it began to starve, his ki flared wildly in an attempt to power his lungs, but there was nothing for them to breathe. His vision was going blurry and dark, there was no chance he had the concentration necessary to shoot off one of his attacks. Instead Goku focused every bit of ki that was trying to save his body and forced it out. A shockwave shook the mountainside. Bellis felt himself blown apart by the shockwave, he went spinning into the air. The dark mage forced himself to a stop just above the treetops, he held himself suspended upside down in midair. He blinked down at Goku, who was gulping down air like a starving man. Okay, that was pretty cool, he muttered, righting himself and floating back to the ground. Not bad, kid. That was my trump card right there, it's never failed before. I can't even do another one right now. Do you have any idea how much energy it takes to create a vacuum? Doesn't matter though, you still can't hurt me. At best this just delayed the inevitable conclusion. I tried to give you a quick way out, but I guess I'm going to have to get a bit more serious. Goku, get down. Normally Goku wouldn't follow an order like that so quickly, he'd at least check to see what was happening, but the sudden shout, coupled with the buildup of energy he could feel behind him, held such authority that he threw himself to the ground so fast he face-planted. Kagura had woken up. The swordswoman stood with archenemy held above her head, the blade was literally crackling with energy as she brought it downward, sending a slash of pure white energy ripping through the air. Bellis instinctively forced himself to dissipate into air before he could be hit. But as the energy passed through him, he gasped in sudden pain. It felt like the blade shredded his insides even as it passed through him. He choked, spitting up a bit of blood as he staggered backwards. Okay, he grunted, clutching at his stomach. That actually hurt. He spat, glaring at the pair. What the hell was that? Neither of the teens responded, instead they were staring open-mouthed at something behind him. What? The man turned behind him, trying to spot just what had stunned them so badly. His gaze flickered around behind him, before stopping. He backtracked, double-checked, triple-checked. His jaw nearly hit his chest as his brain failed to process just what he was seeing. The mountain behind them had been split completely in half. A perfect, vertical line about a foot wide went straight through the rock, so cleanly cut that you could see straight to the other side where the next mountain had suffered the same fate. The man blinked owlishly at the damage before turning back to the two teens. More specifically, the girl carrying the sword. He looked back and forth between the blade and its owner for a short while before deciding on a course of action. Screw this, I'm out. Goku and Kagura barely noticed as the man faded away into the wind and vanished. It was a while before Kagura found her voice. Goku, yeah, do you know anyone that could get me a good seal for my sword? Lucy was unaware of the blue-haired girl who started following her when she left the guild hall. The woman's jacket wilted in the rain as she tailed her query further into the town, away from the fairy tale guild hall. Further from her friends. Further from those that could save her. With a sad smile the woman closed the distance to the blonde and prepared to make her move. Drip drop. Thanks for listening. If you want the next part of this video, be sure to like, subscribe and comment and hit that bell notification. See you next time.